right, everybody, I promised you that I would show you a video of solving the system using substitution because in most of the classes we were unable to finish this. So I'm going to start back from the beginning because I got to different places in all of the classes. So what we are looking at here is solving by substitution. It has the 6 steps, and if you can't remember what they are, if you go back to Monday in the class plan, you can either look again at the Nearpod or get the PDF file. The 6 steps are listed in the PDF file as well. So we start with step number 1 that we need to do is we are going to identify which of the equations is solved for a single variable. Okay, so step number 1, notice I have y equals x minus 1, and then I have negative x plus 3y equals negative 2. And I loved it. In one of the classes, the explanation that was given was the first one because y does not have a coefficient on it. And I loved that. So yeah, so it starts right there with y equals. So it has no coefficient. And then another class, they said it comes before the equal sign. So yeah, exactly. That's what you're looking at. All right, so that's my one that solved for 1, and so I've circled the expression that it's equal to. That's step number 1. Now step number 2 then, I'm going to take and I'm going to substitute that expression into the second equation for y. So right there is my y. And so I'm going to take this whole expression and I'm going to put it in the place of y. So rewriting that equation, so it starts negative 4x, so I put negative 4x plus 3, but instead of putting y here, this is my substitution. I'm going to substitute x minus 1 for y because y is x minus 1. So that's what gives me the right to be able to do that. So I'm going to substitute in x minus 1 for y. And then I finish writing it, so equals a negative 2. Sorry, when my colors change here. So equals a negative 2. All right, so that is exactly what we have. Now, step 3 is to solve this equation. This goes back to that solving equations flowchart that we had in Unit 2. And so you just start asking yourself the questions. Question 1, does distributive property need to be used? Or excuse me, actually question number 1, says, are there fractions or decimals that need to be removed? Well, I have no fractions or decimals, so that one's a no. Question 2 then is distributive property. And do I have distributive property that needs to be used? In this case, yes. And again, the way I identify if I have distributive property is if I have parentheses, then I have distributive property. And distributive property tells me to take what's immediately outside parentheses, the 3 in this case, and multiply it by whatever's inside parentheses. So I'm going to multiply 3 times the x minus 1. Now, that distributive property does not affect this negative 4x. So that's just going to come straight down. That has nothing to do with this. All right, the 3 is positive being multiplied by x, so 3 times x is just 3x, and it's positive. A positive and the negative here, when we multiply, our signs are different. It always gives us a negative, so I can go ahead and put that. And then 3 times 1 is just 3. All right, so see how I kind of separated those two to help me? And then again, equals negative 2 just needs to come straight down. So now I have my equation. Now I'm going to draw that line where the equal sign is because again, it just helps me be able to see left and right hand side. So my next question asks, are there like terms on the same side of the equal sign? Well, there's only one term over here. So over here, like terms, sure enough, because negative 4x and 3x, the fact that they both have x's makes those like terms. So there's my like terms. So negative 4 plus 3, my signs are different, which means I subtract. So 4 minus 3 is 1. But then I use the sign of the bigger number. 4 is bigger, so it's negative. So I'm going to have negative 1x. And then again, I just bring everything else down. Minus 3 equals a negative 2. All right. So there's combining my like terms. Next question, do I have variables on both sides of the equal sign? Nope, only one variable, and it's over here on the left. All right, do I have a constant on the same side as the equal sign? Constants, again, are numbers without variables, and sure enough, I do. So I'm going to use the inverse operation. So since this is a subtraction, the inverse would be addition. So I'm going to add 3 on both sides. All right, this is going to enable me to cancel these 3's. So all I have left on the left is negative 1x. That I'm going to bring down. And then on the other side, I have negative 2 plus 3. So again, I have that situation of the signs are different. So I subtract. So 3 minus 2 is 1. And then the sign of the larger number, well, 3 is bigger and it's the positive. So my answer is going to be a positive 1 there. Now, this last question says, is there a coefficient with x? And sure enough, there is. There's negative 1. Coefficients are always multiplied, so my inverse operation is division. So again, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1. That will cancel those. And so it leaves me with x, which is what I needed, because I need to know what x equals. Now again, multiplying and dividing have the same rules. So since I have one positive, one negative, my answer is going to be a negative. And then 1 divided by 1 is simply 1. So x equals negative 1. All right, so that's what I was doing for step 3, is I was doing all of that solving to figure out what x equals. Now, step 4 is where I'm going to take what I just got here, what this x is, and I'm going to take that value and put it back up into the equation that I circled earlier. Okay, so I'm going to put it back up into there. So that's going to be another substitution, but that's how I'm going to figure out what y is. So y equals, but again, instead of x now, I'm going to use my negative 1. Oh, don't know exactly what just happened there. Sorry, guys. Scroll back down. All right. So instead of x, I'm going to use negative 1. I need to make that where you can see that better. All right. And then that equation says minus 1. So negative 1 minus 1. Okay. So this was step 4, was to do that substitution. Now we solve this for step 5 to figure out what this is. Now remember, this is where we get it a little bit more complicated sometimes, because I've got a negative minus another number. So whenever we're subtracting, we're actually going to do the add the opposite. So we leave the first number alone. We change subtraction to addition. That's the add part. And then the opposite means the second number, instead of being now a positive 1, it becomes a negative 1. So I really have negative 1 plus negative 1. So my signs are the same. They're both negative, which means I actually do add, which gives me 2, but then I keep the sign, so it's negative 2. So there's my y value. So x is negative 1, y is negative 2. So my solution, the last step, is to write it. Remember, x, y. So x is negative 1, y is negative 2, and there is my solution to that system using substitution.